Hello, everyone. I'm Sam Eckmann of Gold Derby here with Reid Scott from The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. And Reid, between, I think, Gordon Ford in this series and Dan Egan in Veep, you have this really great way of playing like likable jerks, if I can say that. So what is it about that kind of character that resonates with you?
God, I get asked that a lot, and it was sort of born. I guess I'll start with Dan, sort of chronologically. Um, I really loved playing that part because he reminded me of so many assholes that I actually knew and really had utter disdain for. So I really sort of relished the opportunity to play the character the way I wanted him to be represented, warts and all, and not shortchange just what an utter douchebag, Dan could be. Um, Along the way, you have to find something redeeming within Dan, to sort of keep that going. You don't want to really like play at the character and make him like a very, mustache twirly kind of villain and everything. And I had fun, and it was very cathartic because Dan got to say a lot of stuff that Reid does not get to say, nor would he if he even had the chance. So it was really fun to lean into it. And then with Gordon, I think he's softer than Dan. He's not as just like total prick as Dan would be. And he was a very easy guy to love because he was very ambitious, but clearly very talented. And it was just one of those really fun parts because it was a character that also exists in the world of entertainment. It was just very sort of fulfilling to sort of play this character who has an artistic streak. Um, and they are similar, although I kind of have a feeling, Dan would work for Gordon Ford, and Gordon would
Mm.
ultimately fire the shit out of Dan for some transgression.
I can definitely see that.
Yeah.
And you were with Veep, you were on that show from the beginning. But in this case, with Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, you joined season four, have a much expanded role for this final season. What was it like coming into this organism that's already in motion, has been for a few years? Did it take a moment to sort of figure out your way?
Yeah, it did. It was a little intimidating right out of the chute. I mean, everyone was just lovely. The conversations I'd had with Amy Sherman Palladino and Dan Palladino leading up to it, um, I've told them this. Um, they are just my kind of weird. I love weird. I come from a long line of weird and crazy, so I think I really enjoy working with people that are just a little outside the box, off the beaten path. I really like that. And if you've ever met Dan and Amy, they are certainly that and more. So I knew I was going to have fun with them. And then meeting Rachel, I think my first day there, she's just so lovely. She just like completely, melted me. And everyone I got to work with really made me feel right at home. But getting up to speed with how letter perfect the Paladinos demand their dialogue to be. I will say I was rusty from Veep, where we were encouraged to be like, let it be messy, just mess it up. We were working from scripts from Veep, but we were very encouraged to sort of take those words and at least in a couple of takes completely make it our own. So basically, going from as far as series goes, going from Veep to Maisel, I was like, oh shit, I haven't hit a mark or said a line exactly the way it was written in like 10 years. So this was going to be a nice learning curve. And I got to tell you, by the end, oh, sorry, let me turn that off. By the end, I absolutely loved it. Like I really loved it. It brought me back to something that I hadn't like just a way of working that I hadn't done in years. And it felt like a play. It was exhilarating all the time because you're walking this razor's edge of just trying to get it just right, but to not make it feel stagey. And it was a dream. By the end, I completely drank the Kool-Aid. I loved working with them. And now I can't imagine working any other way.
And those rapid lines, a lot of actors have described it to me as doing a play because you not only have this rapid paced dialogue, but oftentimes are going through these long continuous shots where there is such tight specific choreography blocking to what you're doing. Did that get easier at all in this second season for you?
Yeah, it did. I love the way the Paladinos sort of write with this music in mind. And, you know, Amy was a choreographer and a dancer for years. So that really kind of makes a lot of sense. And the way they work their production, anyone will attest to this who's ever stepped foot on their stage. It works like an orchestra. It really does. Everyone, and there's, all right, here we go with all the music, you know, analogies, but everyone's working in concert together. And there's this delicate dance that everyone's doing from the crew on down. And you really have to buy into it. And you can only buy into it if you really love the material, which was so obvious that everyone working on the show really loved the material. But the way they would design these sweeping, beautiful camera shots to, you know, really emotionally capture what's going on in the dialogue in the scene. Once you sort of like get that rhythm, again, it feeds the performance. It's really amazing. Like there was I was really, really nervous the night before I got my first, you know, Maisel oneer. I think it was the scene where Gordon comes downstairs and he's flipping out that one of the guests has left and what are they going to do and everything. And Amy told me days before, she's like, "You ready?" I'm like, "Oh God, I hope so." and, and once we got a few under the belt, I was hooked. It's so energizing. And, you know, I mean, I completely exhausted by the end of it, but man, once you get one, you realize it's like, it's addictive. You want to do it again and again. And they just kept raising the bar. So by the end, they're doing these multiple crane shots with, you know, handoffs of the camera in between as the camera floats through the offices and everything. And it's just incredible. It really, it brings you into the world when you realize that every single detail has been thought of, and you have just all of these artists working together to make this thing as cinematic and as big and powerful and emotional as possible. It's infectious.
Yeah. And your character, Gordon Ford, he is a talk show host, a fictional talk show host in this era. Did you want to like pull from actual talk show hosts? How did you sort of cobble him together?
Yeah, I did a fair amount of research, and like I read every book on Johnny Carson I could get my hands on, Jack Paar, and then I reached out to Stephen Colbert, who we've gotten to be, you know, friendly over the years. He was a huge Veep fan, and he was so helpful. It was really like not just for this, but for every other reason. Thank God for Stephen Colbert. But he really he took the time. We had some Zooms like this, and I told him via email and text kind of what I was interested in exploring. And I remember on the first Zoom, he said, you know, it's like how can I help? Because he's like, you know, the offices are closed. It's COVID. I can't really have you come to the set. We're not really doing that. I'm like, you know what? I'm not really interested in what you do when you're sitting at the couch or, you know, behind the desk with your guests at the couch like that. I've got to take on, you know, I can study the file footage of everybody who's done it before. Not that it's, you know, easy, but what I'm really interested in is what's going on behind the scenes, how you transition from, you know, sort of between roles as, you know, in Stephen's case, you know, husband and father, but then you're running the business of this late night show, which is very often the tent pole for any network. So there's a lot of pressure to make these things work. And on top of that, you are, you know, a writer, you know, ostensibly. And while each show has their sort of head writer, the buck stops with the host. So you've really got to approve everything. So you are, and Stephen happens to be very involved in all that. And then on top of that, you've got the face that you're giving America on a nightly basis. And those aren't necessarily always the same faces or, you know, facets of the personality. I was really intrigued with how he handled all that. And that really kind of like sent our conversation down a different path. He really sparked to that. And it was kind of cool. I sort of got the sense, at least, that maybe no one had asked him these questions before. And we talked for a few hours, and he said, you know what you got to do? You need to talk to Dick Cavett. I was like, oh, sure. Yeah, I'll just call up Dick Cavett. Yeah, no problem. He's like, no, hold on a second. I'll get him. And so we had another Zoom, I think a
Wow.
week later, where it was myself and Stephen Colbert and Dick Cavett. And I was like, wow, I'm interviewing Stephen Colbert and Dick Cavett. And they were telling me all kinds of stories, which I shall never repeat. It'll be in my book. And it was so helpful just to see the kind of pressure cooker that they work in behind the scenes. And and I talked about, and we weren't, when I talked to Amy and Dan, we weren't necessarily trying to mine that and put it in the show, but it really just sort of helped myself sort of, run their words through the filter that I sort of had set up after talking to Stephen and Dick. And if nothing else, it filled me with this confidence. I'm sort of like, I know this world. And it's a very unique world. There's not that many people that have had that job,
Right.
and they are iconic positions. So it was, I really, I really wanted to get it right.
I want Amy and Dan to write a scene on that. You and Dick Cavett and Stephen Colbert. I would
Yeah.
watch that series.
Oh my gosh. Sometimes when I'm feeling down, I just sort of replay the interview over because it was such a highlight. It was very cool.
Yeah. And that, we do get a lot of behind the scenes peeks at Gordon. It is a different personality. You have such great like one-on-one scenes with Rachel Brosnahan where the two of you really go toe to toe because you have, I think he has a lot of power play with her. Like when he kind of ignores her in when she says she has the Jack Paar audition coming up. There's such an interesting power play between the two of you. What was it like working with her in those moments?
Oh, she's fantastic. She's fantastic. She's such a strong performer. And she gives everything of herself to every single moment. And I don't know how she does it, doing this show. This is a very difficult show. And she clearly has the most difficult part in this very difficult show that she's pulled off brilliantly for 5 seasons. And that comes from her work ethic. She comes and she is prepared, and you have to be prepared on this show. And on top of that, she's just very giving. We just had a lot of fun. It was oh man, there it goes again. Thought I got it. Luddite. I'm still living in 1960.
No worries.
She and I really enjoyed, this little separate world that was carved out for the world of the Gordon Ford show. I had basically zero interaction with the rest of the cast. It was basically, Gordon and Midge, we are this little bubble. The rest of the cast is there on the sort of the last fateful day when she takes her stand. But other than that, we are our own little show within a show, and the power dynamic is reversed. So in this world, Gordon is top dog, and this is his world, and he doesn't really care what her agenda is. There's the way that he wants things to be, and that's just the way it's going to be. And the personality of Midge and Gordon, it's just fantastic. They even called themselves out on it at some point. It's very, Hepburn Tracy. And it was just so fun to play. And Rachel's fantastic. She's, maybe one of the best scene partners I've ever had. I've been very lucky to work with incredibly strong, powerful, funny, talented women. And, Rachel's at the top of that list.
Yeah. It is so interesting to watch a character who, does frankly sometimes have bad behavior like Gordon does, but is so revered and respected. Like even in the final moments, he's trying to block her and you just go like, no, as an audience member, it's like, well, take this guy down.
Yeah.
But what was that building that world like? Does that make you ever self-conscious to portray someone who is displaying meanness?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I enjoy it. I don't know. I think I grew up, and maybe I'm dark. I always sort of gravitated towards the villains, the Darth Vaders, the Captain Hooks, like those guys is like, they were always so interesting. Heroes are interesting too, and that's cool, but there's just something a little, more juicy about these guys because it makes you wonder, why did they tick this way? And so someone like Gordon, man, the the backstory that we can invent for this guy of why he is the way he is. And, we didn't get to, really, I wouldn't say we sort of like ever locked anything in, but we had a lot of discussions about, perhaps this and perhaps that, and even things that stem from his relationship with his wife, Hetty. He's got this position of power, but how did he get it? There's little things that are alluded to that, when he and George were young, they were basically, he helped pluck Gordon out of basically vaudeville, and then he marries Hetty, who clearly has some family connections. And we never quite got an answer as what, when she says, "Do this for me, Gordon, you owe me." It sort of alluded to the fact, well, they have this open relationship, so it could be that. But we thought it was more fun. It's like, well, there's something else. There's something beyond that. So, Gordon's a guy who's very happy to be where he is. He's at the top. He's number one, but he's clinging to it. He doesn't want to give this up. He doesn't want some young upstart coming in and showing him up. Show business is very competitive. If in case anybody hasn't heard that before. And especially 1962, when you've got, this is a boys club, and he's the big boy of this boys club, and here comes this woman coming in there trying to shake things up. No. He's very much a product of his environment, even though I think he thinks of himself as fairly hip, and socially, forward thinking, at least for the time. But he's a cad,
Yeah. And you were, that scene where you do try to stop her is the last big ensemble moment of the whole series. Mm-hmm. What was it like to film that sequence, knowing that was the end? What was the atmosphere on set?
Oh God, it was emotional for sure. We saved that for the end. That was the last shot of the entire series. And like when I signed on for the show, they weren't exactly sure what was going to happen with Gordon Ford. They knew that he was going to be involved, but we weren't, really sure in what way. And then at the beginning of season 5, remember Dan Palladino kind of jokingly said to me, he's like, "It all ends on you, buddy." I was like, "Oh God, what is that? Like, I'm the new guy. Oh shit. What does that mean?" And they're very, clandestine about their scripts. They keep them very close to the vest until the last minute. So when I saw what they had in store for that last moment, I was thrilled. I was honored to be a part of that last moment, but nervous because, you really want to deliver the emotional payload that it deserves after 5 seasons of this incredible show. And I loved it. I got to tell you, as emotional as it is, and I've had the good fortune to see a few series to the end and have been there for, the series finale. It's an emotional day for sure. You're keeping a lot of it, bottled inside because it's not time to break just yet, but it's coming. And you try to use it. You try to, somehow put it in through your performance. There was a couple takes though, where I remember Amy sort of looking over at me, the camera's on me for my coverage as I'm watching, Midge do her final set. And right around when Gordon starts to really sort of like, buy into it and enjoy it, I think there was like tears streaming down my face. And Amy was like, "All right, that's good. Maybe one where he's, not such a, sniveling, pile." I'm like, okay, yeah, got it. Yeah, he's still, he's still a tough guy. Okay, cool. But it was tough. It was hard. And to deliver those last lines, it was an honor. I got to say, to give her name was very, very cool.
Yeah, really amazing way to end the whole series. So congratulations on an amazing finish. Reid, thank you so much. If you're out there watching, subscribe to Gold Derby. Stick with us the rest of this season. Reid, thank you again.
You got it. Thanks, Sam.